today I'm here, luckily not talking about CO2 or sustainability. I'm going to talk about consumer research. And I've been listening to all the talks since morning and have realized that every single person has probably once or twice or many times mentioned about we need to do what is important for consumers, we need to do what is important, we need to do market research. I'm Halak Parikh, Head of Technical Insights within BRITVIC Soft Drinks. I've been with the business for about 6 years. And the reason I'm talking about this is BRITVIC is a PLC company that is the second largest soft drinks company in the UK. We bottle for PepsiCo, but at the same time, we have our own brands globally. That's when we want to make sure that one of our key pillars is building iconic brands loved by consumers. So for BRITVIC, consumers are really key. So in terms of today, I'm going to touch base on two things, innovation and what is the importance of consumer in innovation. Every single person in this room, we all want to do innovation. Why am I talking about innovation? Because BRITVIC has a commitment towards innovation as well. They really want to make sure that most of our revenue comes from innovation, which is groundbreaking, and that really excites the consumers. So, innovation. As I said, most of us, 80 to 90% of our companies are looking towards driving innovation. And then the downside of that is 80 to 90% of innovation actually does not succeed in market. So you only have about 5 to 10% that succeeds. And there is reasons. There's multiple reasons behind it. The one that I'm going to mainly touch base on is the consumer side of things. So while we're talking about innovation, we want to do innovation and we really can't succeed all the time. For consumers, innovation is really key. Especially in this age, when consumers have got access to so much of data outside, it's not just about picking a product, it's about they can go to the website, look at where they come from, and they can really be immersed in the journey of your product. They are really interested in buying products that are from manufacturers who are really innovative. And this all comes from some source of data that has recent surveys that have been done. They do really care about companies that are innovative, and they've really bought into the product. They would like to buy new products, something that they've never tried before. So if you look at the stats in here, 50% of them say they have bought a new product during the last purchase. 84% of respondents say that they find it very important that the company they buy into have to be innovative. Also, 67% of consumers will want to pay a premium price and are willing to do so if the product's innovative. So if you think about it, not just for the companies to drive business growth, innovation is important, but at the same time for consumers who buy your products, it's equally important. So I'll give you some examples of innovation. I was looking at some awards that we won about 2015, but how they have tackled and looked at consumer side of things. So Unilever worked on sustainable packaging, and this was one of the most category-changing sustainable innovation in the deodorant industry over 30 years. What they did was they were trying to solve a problem of sustainability, but then they know that sustainability is extremely important for consumers. So there was a consumer benefit as well as a commercial benefit. Then, this company, they looked at the scores, they looked at an unmet need of women, and they identified that for many years, the hard skin of your food is very difficult to deal with. And as part of that, the consumers, like the women, had come up with their own solutions, which were not always the right thing to do, not very hygienic or potentially harmful to the women. So to solve that unmet consumer need, that's when the Skulls came up with their product. And I have to touch base on one of our products. So squash. So this was something. So Robinsons is a big squash category in the UK market. We are the market leaders. But we wanted to make it more accessible for consumers outside the home environment. Because if you look at it, at home, you've got like 2 liters, 1 liter bottles. Obviously, you can't be carrying that everywhere you go. So that's when we spotted an unmet consumer need. We identified what the consumer benefits it could bring. How can we grow the category outside the current environment, break the norms? And that's when we launched the Robinson Squash. That made it much portable to consume squash outside your home. So these are just some of the examples of innovation where they've looked at consumer unmet needs, identified a space where it would significantly benefit consumers, and they've tried to solve this. So to be honest, for an innovation to be successful, you need to have consumers at the heart of it. These are some of the ingredients for successful innovation. So I'm not saying consumers is the only thing you need for innovation. I'm a bit biased because I'm a consumer scientist myself. But besides that, you need to have technology feasibility, you need to have business viability, but a massive part of innovation is about consumer need, because if you're not trying to meet a consumer unmet need, it's not going to drive a benefit for consumers. Consumers might want to try it once, they might not buy you again. And that's when your innovation is short-lasted. Besides that, obviously, you need all the other ingredients like the market trends. You need to know what's going on in the market to be able to spot the idea. You need to be able to work with the marketing team. I was reading somewhere that once you've spotted the idea, you've got the right consumer unmet need. But if it's not marketed well enough, you've, again, not hit your successful innovation. So these are some of the ingredients that you really need to have for a successful innovation. So coming on to more consumer-centric innovation. So how can you, and I'm going to touch base mainly on the consumer side of things, because how can you starting from an idea, make sure that you've got consumer focus? So this is generally reflects most of the company's innovation stages. So you start with, you've got an idea, you scope the idea out, you then create a business case, go to your stakeholders, get the sign-off to go ahead. You start doing your product development, looking at what the products are in the market, etc., getting inspiration from products from the other markets. You start to do some testing, validation, and then you identify a product that you're ready to launch. I would say, being in the industry for over 10 years, I've seen most of the companies where we get it wrong is we do about 80-90% of our consumer research and testing at the validation stage. By that time, you've scoped your idea, you know what you're doing. It's too late to make a change if it doesn't meet a consumer need. And that's one of my tips for you. If you can take one thing from me today, is make sure you start doing early stage consumer research. And it's not about spending more money. It's just redistributing our money to doing it late at the end to instead doing it right up front. Because then consumers are on the journey with you, and you exactly can start looking at the risk from a consumer point of view, consumer benefits, and you can scope the idea accordingly. The philosophy I'm going to talk you through today, and I've got some of the agency people in here who've been working with me in the last year to actually embed this type of philosophy in BRITVIC, and it's been quite well received. So there are 3 stages of how do you do early stage consumer research. So you do have loads and loads of ideas. So you screen your ideas, you build an MVP, which is a minimal viable product, and then you measure and learn. So I'll touch base on each of these steps. The most important point of doing screening ideas is you've got loads of ideas floating around. You've got loads of different ways, open innovation, a business strategy, you've got your own consumer, social media, loads of different places where the ideas are coming to you. You've got an R&D team working on it. But how do you identify which one is really going to be the really being successful in the market? So the idea screener gives you a starting point. Besides that, the step 2 and the 3 are mainly, once you've understood which is the idea that is potential, which has the potential, you then identify what do consumers' needs are and what do consumer expectations are to deliver that idea. And that's when the 3-stage process of early consumer innovation. So where do the ideas generate? As I said, you have a business strategy. We all want to start looking at sustainability, health and well-being in our products, etc. That could be your business strategy. Then you start to look at macro fruit trends. You're starting to look at consumer trends. Consumers want to spend more, but they're still ready to pay premium price for innovation. You do what competitor. You also have to keep an eye on your competitors, look at what they have been going towards. Then you have your R&D challenges. So you know there is a supply chain issue, or actually there is sustainability is a classic example of getting a fully recyclable packaging and looking at sustainable sources of packaging. Then you have collaborations like open innovation. All of these, what it does is generates big ideas, and loads of them, not 1 or 2. Now, you can't every team sitting in here from an R&D perspective can say, we don't have unlimited resource, we don't have unlimited budgets. That's when you want to prioritize. And what then you do with these idea screeners is start to look at a bit of an exercise called idea screening. That's when you want to understand, out of about 10, 20, 30 ideas you have, which one is the most relevant to consumers? Is it even believable to consumers? You can't go and say to consumers, I'm going to give you the best tasting drink ever with no ingredients in there. Do you think consumers are going to believe in it? Probably not. So you need to be able to know if the consumers are going to find the idea believable. And then, is it differentiating enough? Because from a competitor, a lot of competitor activities, small industries that are coming up, they're all coming up with new great ideas. How do you compete with them? So you need to have a factor of differentiation. And then, the most important thing about innovation is, are the consumers ready for it? So I'll give you an example of a Water Plus brand, Aqua Libra, which we launched. Water Plus is a big market in the US. It's starting to trend in the UK. But when you actually put it into a standard traditional way of consumer research, consumers are like, I don't like it. Yeah, because if you think about all the products in the market, they're high in sugar, they're high juice products, compared to something which is just a hint of fruit in there. Consumers wouldn't like it. They would reject it. We could have come back from that research saying we don't want to launch it because it's not ready for, consumers don't like it. We still took the risk to go ahead in there because we knew there was a trend, but it was just consumers were not ready for it. And we had that kind of mechanism to understand when consumers are not ready for it, and you still go through it. So that's one you want to do at that first step of idea screeners. Once you've narrowed down from 30, 40 ideas to identify potential 5 or 6 ideas that have the biggest potential, that's when you start creating a minimal viable product. So what do I mean by minimal viable product? In an idea screener, you probably have 2 lines of idea. I want to create a drink that's the most refreshing, does this for your body. But every single person in the room, if I show you the same statement, will have a different expectation. You might be thinking it's a protein drink, someone might be thinking it's a fiber drink, someone might be thinking it's just a normal, not natural drink. How do you try to really understand what the consumer benefit consumers understand? So that's when you create a minimal viable product. That might not be your final product that it could look like. So it wouldn't look like this when you finally launch it, but it might look like this, which represents the benefit of it's going to take you to A to B. And that's your key consumer benefit. That's how you go and test it with consumers at this stage and really understand. With an experimental design, you might have 10 prototypes. One could be just the 2 wheels. One could be the 2 this way, this way, this way. You then realize what's really important for consumers by that design, and then you'll be able to start to understand what is really going to drive consumers to buy that product. That's your minimal viable product. And that's when you go into your feedback loop, which is your 3rd step. The 3rd step of feedback loop is measure and learn. Because I don't believe we can get a product right in first time, especially when it's innovation. Because you don't have nothing like that, and it shouldn't be something like that in the market. So you don't know where to get inspiration from. So that's when, looking at your minimal viable product, you go into an iterative process of build, measure, learn. So you build the product, go to consumers, identify what works, what doesn't work, learn from it, go back to the place again. This also able to also give you consumer segments, because not everything fits everyone's expectations. So you might then also at that point identify that there is a niche market for certain type of products, and then there is this type of consumer benefit which is a mass product. That's when you're also able to start doing consumer segmentation. It's very important because that means you can start to focus your energy on how you market the products, what consumers you market it to. And following the few iterations from your minimum viable product, you will then end up with something that's really ready to launch in the market. The important thing to highlight in here is, if you've not done any of this, you might end up in a process where you have 30 ideas, you might have a bit of a gut feel, I want to go with 5 or 6 of these, and that's when you will put your investment, launch in market, it's not successful. That's when I would say, do spend your time and efforts on doing an early stage consumer research. I don't take the credit for any of the build, measure, learn modules, because I was reading this book about the lean startup, and that's the philosophy of what I'm trying to bring back to BRITVIC, and that's what we've been doing in the last year. So I would highly recommend the Lean Startup and how you can then look at applying that into your manufacturing world. Just the last touch base on what are the different research methodologies that are emerging to help you with early stage. So I would say ethnography, social media, this is kind of trending. Rather than going and asking consumers, what do you mean by sustainability? Would you want a recycling pack? No, don't ask them. See what they're doing, identify a gap, and that's when you create the idea. If you ask them, they will all be influenced by what they're hearing outside, but then when the product is launched in the market, they might not go and buy it. So just be very careful of how you, observational research is quite important at an early stage. Then you have your idea screeners, concept validation, kind of modeling. That's when you understand what are the benefits that are really important for consumers, what are must-haves, what are something that's good to have but doesn't give you the differentiation. So these are the methods that helps you form the concept and the idea. Also identify which ones has the biggest potential. And then some traditional methods that we have been using for years, like focus groups, central occasion, co-creation. Combining all of these a bit more early on will just help you to make sure that your innovation is positioned in the right direction. It has got, your investment is in the right direction, and it's meeting the consumer needs, hence it's likely to be more successful in the market. So just to summarize, build consumer feedback loops early on in the stage. And this is something that I stress all the time. It's really important. Ensure your innovation concept is relevant and believable for consumers. Don't work on something that you gut feel, I believe in it, but you're not going to buy your product. It's the consumers who are going to buy your product. So make sure you do that. Identify innovation which is likely to drive competitor advantage. Now, depending on where you are from your positioning point of view, you might decide to go with a Me Too product, or you definitely want something that's differentiating to consumers. But make sure you know what it is. And build your minimum viable product to identify key consumer drivers. And the last thing, which I've not touched base on the whole presentation, is accept innovation failures. As big businesses, we spend so much investment and money and resource into innovating, we are always scared to learn and say stop on it. Don't do that. So I've learned this from someone, Dr. Samuel West. He's got a Museum of Innovation Failures in Sweden. And it's really interesting how much you can learn more from your innovation failures than actually you can from a successful product. So don't be afraid of having an innovation failure. So the reason we tend to leave the consumer research to validation is purely because we are worried. What if consumers wouldn't like it? We'll have to stop everything now. Cool. That's me. Thank you. Any questions?